I'm deleting this video in 24 hours, and here's why: because nobody watches these videos that aren't based on XCN, and I'm not going to delete it in 24 hours. It's just to get you guys to watch this because it's important information and most likely irrelevant after 24 hours. This is NC Hammer Crypto. My name is Neil, keeping technical analysis short and sweet. As always, starting with Bitcoin, we are seeing it decline even further. We had this bearish engulfing as the blue candle here did not push up towards this previous high, and we are just more than likely having a continuation downwards towards 93,000. Ideally, nobody wants that, but keep in mind the RSI could be forming a W. I could be incorrect, and we could see this trace back up and create a new high above this previous red candle. Enough with Bitcoin, and I'm actually going to be talking specifically about Dash and all the other currencies that people aren't really looking at. Using Dash as an example, because we have gone up since October about 600% or 500 more or less, and it's holding pretty stable in my opinion. Volumes very high. We're not seeing a huge retracement, even though we do have these wick offs happening. Me personally, I think we could see it retrace back down to the $77 mark. In my previous video, I explained we'd hit 72 and most likely retrace, which we did, and we held above the CM Guppy 50 mark and pushed back up. I did not enter at this point. It would be a very nice scalp, but we did push all the way up past around 145 before retracing underneath that, as this is some pretty strong resistance. Looking in previous history, we had some resistance here, but beyond that, around 158 is the only real next resistance, and up here all the way at 250. So nice, easy double money, but I think there still are other coins out there that may make you more money. If you got $100, put it in Dash, see what will happen. However, I think we may still have a little bit of retracement as we are completely overbought here in the RSI. This is a prime example because what happened whenever we broke over this 200 EMA, we had that major push up and continuation. 200 EMA is very important for many of the coins and my strategy. For example, Tornado Cash, which I always recommend. Like and subscribe if you haven't. Use the reference link for Tornado Cash to trade on MEXC. I always recommend using a VPN. By using that reference link, you get 20 USDT for free. And the all-time high for Tornado Cash is $459, currently at $13. And as I've explained multiple times, this $10 to $11 mark right here is very strong support. When we crossed over that 200 EMA, we clearly see that it's never really broke below that 200 EMA on this entire trend. We tried the previous days here, but the $11 is now at support, which is also building a stronger support for this 200 EMA. RSI is healthy, a little bit of volume, and this will break out of this channel that we are working within, being these downward black trend lines. And with Bitcoin's pullback, even how far Bitcoin pulled back, this is only the real distance we saw Tornado Cash pull back. For those of you, I know a couple of you have invested into Tornado Cash, congratulations. Even though it hasn't been moving much, it does move very quickly, as we have seen in the past. Within a day, it went from about $3 up to $39, about 1,000%. So instead of putting $100 in Dash, you could put that same $100 into Tornado Cash and feel a lot more safe. With its consolidation and sideways movement, it is still very strong. The CM Guppy is kind of getting a little weak here, but the 200 EMA and the $11 are clear support for Tornado Cash. If you haven't entered yet, use that reference link, get 20 USDT for free. You don't even have to spend money on Tornado Cash. The link I give you is practically free money, just waiting on the sidelines for you guys to snag it up using that link. Moving on over to Quant. Quant had that 20% movement upwards. It's trying to get a little bit of stability, but the CM Guppy is pretty strong, pushing this downwards. The downward channel that we are working within, these two black lines here, is roughly the range. So what I imagine we could see with Bitcoin's pullback, we could see it do something like this, maybe even test down here a little bit before pulling back up. consolidating and breaking this line is ultimately what we need to do for this thing to start taking off back up towards 112 and potentially this previous high around 123, 124. With all that being said, Quant is very undervalued. It's going to be connecting like Ethereum and Bitcoin and all the platforms that don't communicate with each other, and will be very useful in the future. Even XRP, when we are doing cross-border payments, imagine you have some Ethereum or something that needs to be transferred over. Quant will be beneficial for that. And one thing to keep in mind is the volume. The volume is at right here, about 50% mark of this previous green volume candle. We want to see this start getting more and more volume pushing this upwards, which would essentially be pushing this up to the overbought area, which would mean we would most likely get some rejection here at the 200 EMA and this downward trend line, pulling it back a little bit and trying to build some more support on that CM guppy, consolidate over that, and then ultimately push up towards the upward 124, but keeping in mind the 618 is here at 113, which we may get a little bit of resistance. And this downward yellow trend line is also kind of irrelevant, but it's there for a reason because it's starting from this previous point at 173. We got some resistance here at 136, which ultimately pushed this downwards. So that's 2 to 3 taps here. When we get to the 4th tap, that's where we might see that break, and we might eventually start seeing the push up towards 240 and higher for QNT. Trying to keep this video short because I spend a lot of time talking, nobody listens. DNT is looking obliterated, but similar thing to like we saw with Dash. Once we get over that 200 EMA, the CM guppy and the 200 EMA, once that 200 EMA is crossed, it can start seeing that like 600% movement, just like we saw with Dash. We saw a long played out period where it was getting pushed down by the CM guppy, but then once we got up over it, we still had a little bit of rejection because you can't expect a pop immediately. Tested it again, pulled back for a juke, faked people out, and then ultimately broke out and had that major upward movement. That's kind of what I expect with Dash. We've seen it in the past where we tried pushing up over that 200 EMA, came back down. This orange downward trend line was being formed, and we've touched it 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly 5 times before breaking over it, having that consolidation period, tried testing that 200 EMA, complete rejection here, and then ultimately pushed up over, tested as support, pushed up a little bit more, fake out, liquidity sweep, and then ultimately pushing up to the upside from pennies to 20 cents, I believe. The entry from there to here is about 600%, so it's not irrelevant or I guess not obscene to see for this to get over that 200 EMA and have a 600% increase in price. From a penny currently, even though it doesn't look the best, the 618's here at 600%. If we're going to that previous all-time high, you're looking at nearly 1,000% increase in profit. Put $1 at it, put $100 at it. It can't really go much lower, and it's completely oversold. Not financial advice in any way, it's just my opinion. Breaking this downward trend line is all we really need to do, and then that 200 EMA is the only real resistance. We may see it play out up and down in between there before ultimately taking off 600 to 1,000% for DNT, similar to XYO. XYO is in its downward trend line, downward consolidation, looks terrible, but it is oversold. It's trying to build higher lows here in the RSI. We need a little bit of volume, but this downward play is okay with me. The CM guppy is pushing it downwards. We do want to see this start pushing back into these red lines here. Most likely get a little rejection here around 0.007. This downward trend line has been tested many times. It's very weak at the moment, and getting over that. And once we break over that, I want to see some consolidation personally, no quick movements, but we may be testing that 200 EMA when Bitcoin starts to pull up. First, when Bitcoin starts pulling down, The lower side we could see all the way down here around 0.005. So wait for your entry. But once we break this downward trend line, there's no real reason to not enter into XYO. And it's got a lot of upward momentum and potential. Major cup and handle forming. And with cup and handles, the handles, you always see something long and played out here before breaking this downward trend line and start seeing that upward momentum. Always accepting 10% in donations, and 10% goes to saving animals' lives. Those of you who have donated, much thanks. I'm doing this for free. And those of you who have not liked or subscribed, if you subscribe, it's greatly appreciated, as I would like to get this monetized. So those videos or commercials you see at the beginning of my videos are actually paying me if you guys do not want to, instead of me doing these videos, wasting my breath and my life for you guys to understand the market and hopefully learn. This is all educational. None of this is financial advice, but I really hope you guys can profit even with this market manipulation and not be selling off at a loss. ZBCN wedge forming here. We could see a pullback and eventually pull back up, and holding over this upward trend line is what we want to see. With Bitcoin dropping further, I expect we could be pulling back down here to 0.002 for ZBEC network. I have not entered personally. I want to see something that makes me convinced that this is going to have a continuation upwards. Bringing in Lightlink again, even though it's not anything I really think is anything to be looking at, but the volume is extremely high. We could be bottoming out here, but there's no real validation, so it's all speculation and really a gamble at the moment for LLI or LLU, sorry. CTSI, similar thing with Dash. Once we get over that 200 EMA, CTSI has a very long way to go to hit its all-time high, all the way up here around $1.74. Every time we break over that 200 EMA, we get a pretty major pump. This last one, 131. The next one, 200. The next one, not so much. That was about 64%. But we did break over this red downward trend line, which was its previous resistance. And as you can see, with that previous resistance, we tested the 200 EMA, could not make it over it, tested the downward trend line as support, and are having that consolidation period because Bitcoin is pulling back. Everything else in the market will start pulling back because Bitcoin is king. So even though this may pull back and test this once again, overall, once it breaks over this 200 EMA, we could see a major pump like we saw in previous history back here. Obviously, a little bit of consolidation is necessary, but whenever we broke over that 200 EMA from the current price range we are really at, let's see, 3,348%. You got a nickel and you want to turn it into $2 instead of a dime, great opportunity with CTSI. Highly recommended, very, very good looking coin. Even with its downward consolidation, it's because of Bitcoin's pullback that we have not seen this thing pop yet, but 3,000% is not bad. If you missed your XCN entry for the 2,000% gain, there's a lot more on XCN to go, but CTSI, similar thing. And sneaking in two more, AMP, same thing, breaking over that 200 EMA, major potential upwards. This downward wedge that we are seeing typically has a bullish momentum. It is pretty oversold. Really, the range that I would expect this to pull back if Bitcoin has its continuation, 87% seems ridiculous. Almost all your money gone if you're entering at this point, but the potential upward, 300%. So if you can wait out that period or have your entry above that 200 EMA, 300% is not bad. But keeping in mind the 618 is up here at nearly 3,000%. The full retracement, nearly 5,000%. So AMP really isn't looking that bad. But keep in mind, we've only had this one area where it had this major sell-off, and we never really came back to it. In something like XCN, we have a little bit more data where it did drop from 18 cents to 10. We had that pop. But AMP is just something to keep in mind. Volume is important, and wait for your entry above that 200 EMA, as you could see similar movement like we saw with Dash. And sneaking in Zora, similar thing. It's working within this downward channel. With Bitcoin's pullback, I believe we could see something like this, and then ultimately bottoming out and pushing back up towards this downward trend line. Ultimately, this needs to be broken to start seeing anything to the upside. That's it for this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't. Use my reference link if you want free money. Roller Coin is a great game if you want passive income. Using that reference link, you get 1,000 Satoshi for free. Who doesn't want 1,000 Satoshi in Bitcoin for free? Great example. Some of you have used that, and more power to you. Good luck. Have fun with it. I will do a video specifically on XCN for all the people who have been waiting for new information to be printed out there. And I will see you on the next one.